Hi there, and welcome to Southern Summers and Northern Winters. Hi, Mark. How are you doing this week?
Hi, Anders. I'm, pretty good. Got a little bit going on with going to China on Wednesday. So, especially when me and my wife work, and we're working all the way up until tomorrow afternoon when we leave, about an hour and a half after that to go to Melbourne. So it's been a bit hectic, but it's always the way. You know, you're always thinking of, what have I forgot? Have I got enough of this? Did I bring that? Am I going to bring that? Am I going to forget this?
Yeah.
You know, no matter how many times you travel, we still go through that pre-travel routine all the time where we think we can't or don't have it. But, you know, as everyone knows, you can buy anything anywhere these days. But
even in China, yeah.
Especially in China, because it probably all comes from China in the first place. So.
Yes, exactly. But I remember because my wife is always saying, you know, I will start packing, you know, with proper time and I will do it, you know, so that I will have no stress. Yet she always ends up doing it last minute anyway. For some reason, all these procrastinations up until, you know, obviously she hates packing, but it's just. For me, I know in my mind what I need to go through to have like a week's worth of t-shirts and underwear and all these things. Even when I was a business traveler back in the day when I would be traveling a lot for work, I usually would pack in the morning, literally almost on my way to the airport, because I always knew I need to grab the on my toilet bag was always the pouch there. It was always more or less ready to just go, so just grab it and a couple of t-shirts, a couple of iron shirts and stuff like that, a suit, all these things. It was just like really just grabbing things in the closet and just quickly wrap it up in the bag and on my way I was. But leisure travel or just, you know, vacation, family travel is just different. I mean, it's
sort of become a bit lackadaisical, I guess. As I've got older, like at one stage, I would have been packed like a week beforehand and things like that, and had everything laid out and ready to go. And the older I get, the more I seem to take longer to do it all. So or leave it to more of the last moment, which is okay, because I'm fairly organised, but my wife and my daughter, they get a little bit of anxiety and stress that they've got everything and this and that. And this trip is a little bit harder too, because like I said, we're going to a cold weather environment to start off with, and then we're going to a hot weather environment straight afterwards. So the suitcases are a little bit fuller, and because Willow's living in China, she's got a lot of stuff that she wants us to bring over. So we've got extra bags and things like that going on. So it's a little bit more, more thought going into it.
You are actually going with a very full suitcase, but then as of China onwards, it's going to be easier in terms of room. Yeah.
Getting rid of more than half of it in China. So luckily the airline that we're flying with, Beijing Capital, they allow each person to have 2 bags up to 23 kilos each. So that's a lot of luggage, but that only works if you're flying the same airline back. And coming back, we're flying a little bit cheaper airline, so we really need to have, you know, like the normal allowance by the time we get back, which we certainly will, because and I've got a whole sports bag full of stuff that Willow wanted, and because it's Christmas and we're not sure what they do at Christmas, Rebecca's got some bonbons and Christmas wrappers and some extra food that she wants to make at Christmas Day over there and things like that. So we really chock-a-block, the suitcases are at the moment, but it'll all, once we get there, the day after we get there, we'll unpack it all and give it all to Willow and tell her to take it home to her house.
Yeah, exactly.
And it'll be much better.
What is the normal luggage allowance these days? Is that like the 23 kilo or 20? I think in Europe,
it's normally 20 or 23, depending on which airline you're with. These days. But I find that if you're flying like a full fare carrier, generally they're not that strict some of the time, especially for hand luggage. Like they all say 7 kilos, but I couldn't remember the last time that someone weighed my hand luggage, unless it was on, a budget airline like Jetstar, which is an Australian airline, or AirAsia, or if you're on a really, really cheap airline, well then they will weigh it, because that's obviously how they make their money is by extras. But yeah,
even the European main airlines. I was booking not a business ticket, but I'm going on a work trip in January, and we booked the flight last week, and it was as if if I wanted to go on an airplane with wings, I kind of had the feeling that would cost me extra.
Definitely. It's like one big sales funnel, isn't it? Do you want a seat?
It really was.
Do you want a meal?
If you want a fixed seat, definitely that costs you like 10 euros or 20 euros. If you want an email confirmation or an email reminder or a text reminder, all these things that really, it's just a technological wing you need to just wing off on your booking. They will charge you for that, and for the company, it's literally at no extra cost for them. It's no extra admin, nothing. It's just a rip off, honestly.
Yes, it's the magic add-on, isn't it?
Yes. That
we get with all things these days, isn't it?
And I'm flying only with carry-on, so yeah. Okay. But it because what you said reminded me that they usually we'll see how it goes now in January, but usually they are sort of large or tolerant in terms of we can see that this is not only 7 kilo, but maybe 10 kilos, but they don't really care. I mean, also because I guess it will take too much time for the onboard personnel to make sure that nobody carries extra weight. I mean, so they have this span, this where they can probably carry an extra ton in total.
That's it.
With no problem.
The issue is, and then they just tell you to take it out of your bag and put it in your pocket, or put it on anyway. So you're still carrying it. So I don't really know what the deal with it is. Like, I mean, my bag's overweight tomorrow. In my carry-on, I carry all the camera equipment, stuff like that.
Yes, of course.
Some drones and cameras and things. And in reality, a lot of it I could just take out and put in my pocket anyway if it was overweight. And they seem to be happy with that, but as long as it's not in the bag sometimes. But you know who's to blame for all this, don't you?
No.
McDonald's. Do you want fries with that? Well, do you want a seat with that?
Yeah.
Do you want a meal with that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's all moved on from when McDonald's first started saying, do you want fries with that?
Yeah. Yeah, but it's really it's really me and my boss, we both got annoyed because he was in charge of booking the airfare, and we found what appeared to be good priced time slots, and so that seemed to be in order. But then before we had closed the booking, it was like an extra almost 100 euros extra, and it was. You couldn't avoid at least a couple of the fees were just, they were absolutely mandatory. And
what I don't like is the ones, like you find this with hotels too, and some airfares. You look at the price, okay, so you load it in, then you go to pay for it, and then all of a sudden they've dumped like 10 or 20% tax on top of it, like that wasn't in the original price. But when you go to pay for it, all of a sudden you're like, well, where's all this other cost come from? Oh,
exactly.
Well, it's tax. Well, this display the full price up front, including the tax, so everyone knows what it is. Like I've been caught with that a few times with airfares. There's a Vietnamese airline called Vietjet, and they are famous for that. Like I booked this flight from Bali to Ho Chi Minh City once, and it was like $80, and I was like, yeah, this is really, really good. And then when I went to check out, there was like $120 tax on it. The tax was dearer than what the actual flight was.
Yeah.
So.
And what they also do sometimes is that some technical error happens. We're sorry to tell you, but the time and the ticket that you've just been trying to book is no longer available. And then I try once again, and then the dynamic pricing has somehow, I don't know, done something so that obviously now this price is absolutely no longer available. My price has doubled in price, or my ticket has doubled in price. So yeah, it's just. It's a scam.
It's a bit like booking.com when you book a hotel and they're like, you need to be quick. There's only 2 rooms left. Like, no, there's not.
Yeah, exactly. There's 10
or 20 rooms left, really. Like, it's just another sales ploy to make it all happen, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So have you ever been traveling where you just, because now you're in the packing phase, have you ever had a situation where you literally say to yourself, "Well, I could have flown away with about half of what I packed"?
Always. Whenever I used to bring a big suitcase, that was always the case. Now I only bring a small carry-on suitcase, but I end up having to check it anyway because I've got to take my backpack on board most of the time. So, but what I find is that if you take a big suitcase and a lot of clothes, after you wear the first few pairs and then you get them washed, then they just come back and they sit back on top of your suitcase.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you tend to just wear the same ones over and over again because they're on top of your suitcase. Now, this is a question I'm interested in asking. Like, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but do you ever go I assume if you stay a long term, like I don't generally stay anywhere for maybe more than a week at a time. I might and I never actually unpack my suitcase into the cupboards that are in hotels or things like that.
Question.
Are you an unpacker?
Yes, we are, because we have the cells. So I will have a cell with t-shirts and underwear and socks, for instance. I just dump that entire cell into the cupboard.
Okay.
I don't unpack the cell, but it's just to get rid of the suitcases. So if there's by the entrance, by the wardrobe, there's usually like a big closet. So we just dump all the suitcases there, and then we have our cells in our respective cupboards. I think that's how we do it. And if we have stuff like my wife, she will have some. I don't know, some stuff that needs to hang, hangers.
As they do.
As they do, as they tend to do, the ladies.
But I've never actually unpacked. I just wear it out of my suitcase. So I just open my suitcase up on the floor and open the lid up, put it against the wall, and I generally just pick out of there. But it's one of my further goals one day to actually stay somewhere where I think is long enough to justify me unpacking it into a wardrobe or something like that and taking it out of there. So one other thing, like I often read, I don't know if this is an American thing, but you read about people getting bumped off flights and overbooking flights. Have you ever come across that?
Yeah, it was once on a business trip as well, where they had overbooked the plane. It was out of the United States.
There you go. Yeah,
and then I go back to Europe. I think it was like Chicago Amsterdam flight or something, and they said, we're overbooked. If someone can take the next plane, we'll reimburse you, or you can get a voucher for something in the terminal, a good restaurant or something. Yeah, so I did actually. I volunteered because I had no plane to catch in Amsterdam. I had a day extra for my Amsterdam. The stop over. So it was fine for me. But it hasn't happened in a while. I don't know if they've gotten better. I don't know, but they used to overbook flights permanently.
Yeah, I often see people talking about it, like on maybe Twitter or Instagram threads, things like that, where they've. But I've never experienced it anywhere in maybe 50 or 60 plus flights I've ever taken. I've never been asked to. Or I don't even actually remember anyone ever being, asked. Well, I guess you don't get asked on the plane. You probably get asked at boarding, don't you, beforehand? So but I've never come across it. I don't know whether it's because we travel possibly as a group of maybe 4, so it's probably a bit hard, or
that's
3
probably
to bump a family. I guess, but but I've never ever come across it. So.
They used to do this because apparently there were a lot of no-shows usually. So they, but I don't know why you would pay for a ticket and not show up. It's just, there's no reason for me to it doesn't make sense.
It's like you can often, I read about like people who, there's a name for it and I can't think of it, but where say you book a ticket from, for instance, in America, you might go from New York to Los Angeles, but it has a stop in Las Vegas, and it's actually cheaper to book, to book the flight to Los Angeles than it is to book the flight to Las Vegas. And then you actually get off. Then you actually get off in Las Vegas and don't get back on the plane. Now, this is a thing that people do, but apparently if you get caught, or the airline can ban you from flying again with them if you actually get caught doing this, because it's for them just to obviously fill the plane. They don't want you to have the cheaper option. But I guess it only then works if you take carry-on and nothing else, because you wouldn't be able to uncheck your luggage because it would get passed through. But I've read a bit about this too. This is the thing that people often do. In Australia, it's not here nor there because there's not enough places, that you fly to. But yeah, so I don't know. But I've never done it, but I've actually read people who do it, and sometimes it's cheaper with that. Cheaper to do it that way.
That's just an example of the customer being smarter than the supplier, because United Airline or whatever airline does this, they should have a different pricing metrics. I think they it doesn't make any sense if it's cheaper to fly to Los Angeles than it is to fly to Las Vegas.
Las Vegas, and if it stops in Las Vegas, you jump off there.
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's just the way it goes, I guess, for some people to do it that way. I'm all for saving a buck. Airlines, like we said, like we just mentioned, airlines are happy to wring every possible cent out of you to start off with, and as airports. So that's just the way it goes. You save $1 wherever you can save $1, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and. We've often talked about this in the podcast. The hassle of flying, the stress it has become. I don't know, how old were you the first time you ever flew, Mark?
I was in high school, I think, and I went on a school camp where we flew to Tasmania, so it was only
domestic,
an hour away, domestic. First time I flew international, I would have been I was in my mid-20s, so I was a late starter, and I flew to London from Melbourne, and it was like the cheapest flight I could get.
It's a long one.
And in order for that, it went from Melbourne to Adelaide to Bali to Bangkok to Frankfurt and then to London.
Wow. It was like 5 stops. Wow.
5 stops it was. And it was certainly a long flight, but when you've never flown before, it was all a little bit exciting. And I don't mind if there's a long stop. Like from my memory, we stopped in Bali for about 7 hours, and I'd met some people on the plane, and they knew some people who were staying there. So we actually went out of the airport and went to some hotel and had a few drinks with these other people, and then came back and got back on the plane to Bangkok. But Bangkok and Frankfurt were only like 2-hour stops. But that was actually that long ago that you were allowed to smoke on a plane back then, and I was a smoker, so you were allowed to sit down the back of the plane. But it was quite funny. It wasn't all sectors. I don't know if Australia had banned it at that stage, but you couldn't smoke between Australia and Bali. But between Bali and Bangkok, you could smoke. And between Bangkok and Frankfurt, you could smoke. But between Frankfurt and London, you could not smoke. So, so it was quite strange, because now obviously you can't smoke anywhere.
No.
It's persona non grata to, in Australia to even smoke on the beach. I don't even think you're allowed to smoke legally anymore on the beach, or even out the front of a restaurant. You've got to be, 5 or 10 meters away or something like that up the road, or all these sort of things like that. So needless to say, even if you didn't sit in the smoking section, which was probably the last maybe from memory, the last 4 or 5 rows, people would come from the front and they'd come up the back and stand up the back and have a ciggy, and then, and they go back up to their seat in the front and things like that. So that's showing my age. I was back in maybe 1999, I think that was. So pushing 25 years ago now when smoking was still allowed. But even back then, I remember, because as a smoker, I went to England and, well, even as a whole, I think there's probably more smokers in Europe and Asia than there is in Australia these days. And back then, you could smoke on a train in England, in a shopping centre. There was all these things where in Australia you couldn't do. Even back then, you couldn't do any of that. So it was quite, I'd say an eye opener. But just something quite different, which is what you travel for. But not necessarily. I don't travel for smoke. But it was just a different setting, I guess. So quite strange. But in the end,
so you have been flying like before 9/11, because before 9/11 it was a little more relaxed, particularly in terms of check-ins and security. But I started probably my first flight was in the early 90s, I think, and that was even more relaxed, and there would be like a proper service on board, proper meals on plates and real utensils, and but I've seen pictures, of the early commercials for Lufthansa. They would have a kitchen with
Pan Am and things like that back in the 60s,
gas, with a gas stove and everything. You think today that's just highly, highly, highly prohibited. But back
was
then,
there any more? But was there any more crashes back then? Like I tend to think that we're overgoverned by rules these days. I mean, obviously that's a safety matter, but I don't. It's like all things. I think before the internet, I don't know whether a lot of things happened as much, but you never heard of them because the information wasn't out there and freely available as it is these days. You know what I mean? So you never really knew if it was if there was crashes or a lot of crashes, because unless you watched the news or read the paper, and if it was happening on the other side of the world, it was probably not being reported in your local paper anyway.
Exactly.
So, but now, if there's a plane crash or something happens, it's all over the web, and everyone knows about it. So I often think that with a lot of things, you hear so many more things these days because, the information's readily available all the time compared to when it wasn't. Now, what else was I going to talk about?
I can sort of understand why you cannot have like an open fire gas stove on board a gas-filled cylinder flying in the sky. That makes sense, but I have never heard of an airplane exploding because people were cooking in the kitchen there. It's just to say that in the early days of flying, there was it had a proper standard, luxury. It was
definitely.
Obviously, you paid a lot more compared to what you're paying today, but still, I mean, it's
this is the issue, isn't it? We all want to pay as cheap as possible for everything.
Yes.
So in the end, we get what we pay for, I guess. In the end, don't we? So Now, what was I going to say? What was I going to talk about? Now, you've travelled a fair bit. What are some of the most overrated tourist attractions you've ever seen?
I will have to say, I have a few.
I've got one that comes from your country. So,
okay, well, save that a bit. I would say the biggest or most overrated attraction is probably in Copenhagen, The Little Mermaid. Is that the same you're thinking about?
This was the one I was going to say, yeah. Like, whenever people talk about this pops into my mind straight away. Is this statue of the Little Mermaid. Like, you read about it, it's a fairy tale about it. You get on the hop-on, hop-off bus in Copenhagen, even stops there for like 20 minutes, I think. You can get off and get back on, so you can take a photo of this midget statue, just in the water.
It's just, I don't understand it. For some reason, Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, they're popular, world famous, and I think that's the reason why that statue is so popular. But yeah, I've even seen the Asian tourists. They stand there, they smile, they're always polite, and but you can sort of see the
They're expecting more.
Yeah, they were probably expecting more. So they're not entirely dissatisfied, but it's just okay, we travel all the way for this, sort of that expression,
Yes, definitely. Look, I've got another one, and I'm told I'm probably the only person who was ever disappointed by this. But one of the biggest disappointments I ever had was when I went to Pompeii. Like I found it really, really not what I was hoping. I don't know whether because I had wanted to go there for so long that that I had some sort of expectation that was over the top when I went there. But when I went there, I found it a lot of it was closed off. It was dirty. A lot of the pictures that you see in books, which had nice bright colours, when you seen them there, they were all dull. Like I don't know whether they were photoshopped and things like this. So yeah, that was probably another one of the really big disappointments. Now I've always said that I'll go back one day because I like to give things a second
chance.
Shot. But I was quite disappointed by Pompeii when I went there. But when I tell that to people go, "What, are you crazy?" Like I loved it. I went there and I was like, well. I guess that's why we're all different. I certainly did not love it.
Yeah. Well, while we're in Italy, I've been there several times. The Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Yeah.
It's. I've even been up in the tower and looked out and everything. It's nice, but it's not that nice. It's not something I would travel from the other side of the world to see. I mean, if it
wasn't leaning, it wouldn't be famous, would it?
No,
Literally.
No, it's and it's the whole sort of a compound or lots of buildings, and there's a church, and there are so many tourists, and it's just that's really also a thing that can sort of help to the disappointment, to add to the disappointment is if it's overrun.
Definitely. Like probably one of the memories I cherish the most from traveling was going to the Great Wall of China, and we went there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there was no one on the wall for a lot of the time we were actually there. It was only tempered by the fact that the weather wasn't very good and it was a little bit foggy, but the fact that we got to spend a good couple of hours sort of wandering this section, which was about maybe 3 or 4 kilometres long with, really next to no one on it is a really good memory that I always think of. So what about any spots that exceeded your expectation, or you think that is people should go there or maybe don't know about, or...
Yeah, that could be a little bit dangerous for me to answer because I don't know. That I haven't been to. The first time I went to Paris, I was actually very pleasantly surprised, and it was a really good experience because I was. I was traveling with my company at the time, and we had a couple of the extra days off to just it was sort of an award trip, for best salespeople, and so it was really nice, and we were able to bring our partners, and we really had a good experience, and quickly we got around to use the metro system and saw a lot.
Metro's fantastic.
It is. So Paris was really a good experience, but I haven't been there for 20 years, so I don't know if people will say.
I like Paris, and my wife likes Paris. We've been there 6 times, I think. Yeah. So it's probably one of the places I've been to
the most,
and a lot of trips. We always go to Paris. I quite like Paris. A lot of people. I think that it's very polarizing. People either love it or they hate it. I think with Paris.
Are you going to see the Notre Dame? It's reopening, or I
did see that. I've watched a couple of YouTube clips on it. I've only ever been in it once. Rebecca went in a couple of times. Every time we went, I sort of stood out the front. But it looks to me, from my memory, which was a long time ago, it looks a lot different inside. It looks a lot brighter than what I actually remember it to be. Which is good. I mean, I guess if you're rebuilding something, you need to make it a little bit more modern, I guess, as long as they keep the sense of what it was like, I guess, and which they seem to say they have. So I would definitely go there and have a look. There's a little plaque, or there was a plaque, okay, in the ground out the front of Notre Dame. And the very first time I went to Paris, I was on a tour, and I don't know whether this is true. The tour guide said, if you stand on this plaque, there's a myth. If you stand on this plaque, it means you'll come back to Paris. So every time we went there, we'd go and stand on this little plaque.
Yes, of course,
out the front of Notre Dame. So,
in terms of it being more brighter and lighter in the colors, I guess it has to do with the centuries old domes and churches in Europe. The stone walls, they get dark from years of candle lights. They usually in the old days
the smoke
they would only have
stuff that burns on it.
Yeah. So
yes.
Yeah. So what? Obviously they've used new stone and everything for rebuilding Notre Dame. So I guess if you come back in about 100 years, I don't think they use candles as much anymore. But
you wouldn't think so, would you?
Yeah, but that's the reason. Yeah,
I can vividly remember the day it caught on fire. That was really sad, actually. Yeah. Because I mean, there's so much history involved in it, and it dates back to the 12th century or further or something like that, and had a lot of history, and you don't want to lose buildings of that caliber anywhere in the world, especially.
We lost the old Copenhagen Stock Exchange last year.
Yes,
it was it was built by Christian IV, the King Christian IV in 1600 something. So it's about 500 years old. They are rebuilding it. And there's a dragon's tower symbol of Copenhagen, and they're rebuilding that as well. The problem with it is that you can't get that those craftsmen that used to do it. They're
not around.
They're not around anymore. You don't build that anymore.
This was the problem, I think, with Sagrada La Familia in Barcelona, as to why it's taken so long, because they just didn't have the craftsmen that were around when Gaudi first designed it to continue building it. And I've got to say, I've been in there once, and I would measure all churches against what Sagrada La Familia is like on the inside. It's mind blowing the
I haven't been there. It's on my bucket list. Yeah,
it is. It's an amazing church on the inside and on the outside, for that matter. So I think it's due to be finished in the next couple of
years.
I think. Yeah,
I think they're saying 26 or 27. I think.
Yeah. It should be done. So after 150 years or something like that. So that would be good, but it's cost them so much. Well, I think it's all privately funded. That's what half the ticket prices are, and donations. And things like that. I don't think the government fund all of it, because it's been built for 120, 130 years.
Well, the Spanish state, they don't have much money anyway, so they can't fund it.
No, they don't. And Catalonia is the most well-off part of it, and I guess every now and again they strike up a vote for independence, and and the central government then strike it down because they're going to lose all their money.
Exactly. That's a funny thing, because there are regions in Europe where you think, you have Germany, you have Spain, but Spain is one country, Germany is one country, but it's not. We have these states within the country lines, with the country borders, and it's the same thing in here in Germany, in Bavaria. Yeah. Bavaria is a well-off state in Germany, and there's it's not a very active independence movement, but there are particularly amongst the elder population, the older population, there are some nostalgic people thinking, it would be nice if Bavaria would be independent. Obviously, in a modern society, it's not really possible. But
no. You often hear that in Italy too, don't you? With Venice, I think Venice has like an independence movement at times as well, where the Venetians want to break away as well. And it always seems to be these are the most prosperous areas of these countries are the parts that want to. You never hear a poor part wanting to break away from from the central government, do you? It's only the places that are making a lot of money. So getting back to what we're talking about, weren't we? Things that I went to a place just out of Krakow, and it was called. I'm going to try and pronounce this. It was called Wisliczka Salt Mines. And it's one of, I think, the most underrated attractions that I've ever been to. And it's a UNESCO site. And it was a salt mine that goes back like 600 years or so. And there's like 100 kilometres of tunnels underground built out of salt. And while the miners were down there, they carved statues and there's like a ballroom under there and a place for weddings and little chapels and things like that. And it was stunning. I've been there twice. Every time I've been to Krakow, I've only been there twice, and I've gone back to this salt mine to see it again and again. And it's it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's only about 10 kilometres out of the centre of Krakow, so it's very. There's always a lot of people there, but I don't know whether it's well known outside of Poland. But stunning. You got to go down and you get in there, and you got to walk down something like 200 meters down in these steps to start off with. But there's this, you get lost there. You have to go with a guide because you get lost. There's so many little chambers and tunnels from where they built. Actually, I think I've still got some salt from there in a salt grinder that I bought 5 years ago when I was last there. But needless to say, if I go back to Krakow again, I would go back out there again because it had definitely changed in between when I went there in, I think it was like 2015 and 2019. They'd opened up new tunnels and new sections of it. So it's probably one of my top underrated sites that I've been to in Europe. For sure.
I'll remember that. I love caves. We have throughout Europe. There are several, even here in southern Germany, we have salt mines and silver mines and whatnot, and caves, and I always like to go to these places because there's some aura of ancient times. When you enter such a mine or cave, it's just obviously it must have been a difficult workplace for people through the times. A miner is dangerous work. So sometimes it's also connected to deaths and all of that. But still, it's there's something about it when you enter such a place in the ground that it sort of calms me down. And also the temperature and the sounds are just different. So it's always a great experience. I can only recommend it.
And that's basically where our ancestors lived, years and years ago, wasn't it? They all lived in caves, and quite often a lot of these caves are where they, find the skulls and skeletons from Cro-Magnon man and, and all these other Homo erectus and, and whatever they all our long lost ancestors that walked out of Africa billions of years ago and, and spread around the world. So I find it interesting too.
Yeah, it's fascinating because even speaking of Paris again, I mean, in Paris you have the catacombs. You have they are man-made, but still you have like an underground world that's just completely separate from above ground, and same with the caves. It's just you enter a completely different ecosystem, and I think that's what fascinates me. Have you been to the catacombs in Paris?
I have been to the catacombs in Paris, and I quite enjoyed that. I went there a long time ago, probably one of the first times I went to Paris. But in saying that too, in southern Portugal, there's a lot of what they call bone churches as well, where You can go to church and the walls and the ceilings are lined with skulls. So I've been to a couple. I've been to a couple of them as well, which was quite challenging because our kids were little when we when we went there. So
a little scary for them.
Yeah, it was. So we obviously talked about it before we went, and so I think Willow was a little bit older than Marley, but Marley was maybe, I'm trying to think when we went there, maybe 2:15. So Marley would have been about maybe 7. So at that stage, and I remember her having a sort of look in the door, and then she slowly backed out of the door and sat outside for a minute and sort of thought about it and came back in, had another bit of a look around and and then backed out again. So we actually went to 2 of these churches. There's a famous one in a place called Evora in Portugal, and there's another one down on the Algarve, what town it was in Faro, I think it is. And so they were quite interesting to go and have a look at as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only recommend people to do this because this is where you can really get some ancient history.
Definitely.
Because at the surface, everything has been touched or is constantly touched and remodeled and rebuilt and changed. But down there, underground, things are like they've always been, So, and in Paris, you have the catacombs, you have places where people haven't been for hundreds of years.
I think I went to one in Rome too, a catacombs, but it wasn't. It was not as good as the ones in Paris for sure. There wasn't as many bones and stuff there.
Okay, yeah.
From what I remember, we definitely went to one in Rome, and it was nowhere near as good. But hey, this.
Have you been to all the mandatory sites in Rome? Speaking of pleasant surprises or disappointments, because you've been to Rome.
I've been to Rome.
I've heard different opinions about the main attractions in Rome. I
loved the Colosseum, and I would go back to the Colosseum in a flash. I thought that was stunning. Just to stand in the middle of it is fairly inspiring, I think, to imagine that they built a stadium, this size so long ago, and that it's still mostly standing. Obviously, one side standing more than the other. So that's definitely a site that I would highly recommend anyone to go to because it's a must see. Like if you go to Rome, well, you associate Rome with Colosseum. You go to Paris, you associate it with the Eiffel Tower. It's one of them sites. In Rome, obviously adjacent to the Colosseum, there's a lot of old ruins that, I think it's Circus Maximus and the Palatine Hill. I think it is. Yeah. It's got a lot of old ruins about it. I really liked going to see all that stuff in Rome and quite enjoyed it. I went to quite a few churches while I was there as well. Like I said, I've got to think about churches. I'm not religious, like I said, but I like the history behind of them. Actually, one of the best tours I ever did was in Rome. I went on this thing called Ghosts, Myths and Legends, and me and Willow, she was only about 11, and we traipsed around Rome one night with a guide who was telling us about people were murdered here and blocked up in a wall here until they died and all this sort of stuff like this. So it was like called the Dark Side of Rome it was, and it was really, really entertaining and quite good. And I've been on a few of these sort of tours over the time now where they tell you about, the darker past of places. And I actually quite enjoy learning about that sort of side of many.
We have to sometimes we have to be reminded that we humans, we have a violent past.
Oh, most definitely, especially back in them days when, if you were rich or wealthy or in power, you could get away with doing most any of this stuff. And there was no, I mean, I'm not saying that rich people probably still get away with it today, but that's a whole different story. But
there's a different sense of justice. There was a different sense of justice back then.
Different sense of justice back then. But I quite enjoyed Rome for sure. I think.
Yeah, me too. I've been there several times, and it's always a pleasant surprise because, again, you have so much history.
Definitely.
And the Romans, they sort of live side by side with their past. Somehow it's just they've just built new houses on top of the old
around it. I know.
Yeah.
I find it I find it fascinating. Like I said, that's something as an Australian that we don't have because our history only stretches back to like 1788, officially when the English arrived. And so, there's not much in Australia that's greatly old. I was watching a show the other day on the oldest building in Melbourne, and I think like the oldest building in Melbourne still stands was only built in like 1888 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's only necessarily 140 years old or something, the oldest building that's still
I think we have a house here in our street that's older than that.
Yeah, that would be older than that. Most definitely. Another weird attraction that I've been to in Wales is called the world's smallest house. This is in a quaint little seaside town called Conwy, and there's a little attraction called the world's smallest house, and it's probably, I would think, no more than 2 meters wide, and it's double story. It has a ladder in it, and, which was quite quirky. But there's probably there's a lot of small buildings these days in cities. But this was quite a quirky little place. And I've been to this town in Wales a lot called Conwy. The very first castle I ever went to was in Conwy, and it's called Conwy Castle. Funnily enough, it was built by Edward III in the 12th century, and he built a ring of castles in northern Wales, which was to keep the English, keep the Welsh in line because he was an English king, and that's where they used to always crown the Prince of Wales, which is one of the English monarchs. So there's quite a few really nice. Well, when I say nice, they're not nice because they're brutalist castles from back in them days. They're big walls and things like that. They're not intricate or anything like Neuschwanstein or something like that. They were a purely defensive sort of.
They were built to impress and build fear.
Yeah, build fear. Yeah, they were built to intimidate the Welsh, basically back in them days. So, I think there's about five there. There's Conwy, Carnarvon is another one, and that were all built in this like 50-year period when this king was trying to subdue the Welsh.
Yeah.
But Wales is a beautiful area to go to. Like Wales is often talked down by the English. Like they reckon it's dreary and stuff like that, and the weather's bad. But I've been to Wales. I've spent a lot of time in Wales, surprisingly. I had a cousin sort of cousin's cousin, really. But he had a caravan on the north coast of Wales, and we stayed in it a few times. So I probably spent about 8 weeks in total in North Wales in my time, and really, really enjoyed staying in North Wales on the coast.
Yeah, it is a nice area, really.
And it's out of the way. Not many international tourists go there. A lot of Brits go there for the weekend because it's not far from Liverpool and Manchester and places like it's about an hour down the road.
But international tourists, they usually go to London and then they go to Scotland.
Yeah, so quite nice North Wales. I think it's underrated as an attraction or a place to go.
I agree. And I'm thinking about what you said, the world's smallest house, because in general in Europe, houses tend to be smaller than they are in, say, Australia or the United States. I mean, we can live here. My family live on about 70 square meters.
Yeah.
You have a larger house in Australia, I know. But 70 square meters is like, I don't know, a kid's room in the United States, isn't it?
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I'm just trying to see how big this house is. Where are we? I've got Wikipedia opened here. What's it say in its size?
But I've heard it on a couple of occasions that, international tourists, they say, can people live in such small rooms?
Definitely.
But it's really about just getting used to it. If you've never seen anything else, one of my dreams is to have like an old stone house in Tuscany or an old flat in one of the Tuscan small towns, hill towns, and they would be like probably 50 square meters or something like that. But
so when you were younger, like in Denmark, did you live in a city or were you out of the city in Like
I lived in a
I
suburb.
mean, not in Copenhagen. I mean, not in you know what I mean.
I've lived in Copenhagen. Yeah, I've had a house in or flat in Copenhagen. And it was about 100 square meters, 2 or 3 bedrooms and kitchen and living room and all of that. What tends to make the big difference is the when you live as a European, when I see houses for instance, in the United States, there's a lot of what we call wasted square meters because the rooms are very big, but in the middle there are just, vast floors. Why would you? It's not. We like things to be more intimate because we think it's cozy to not have too much space. It's and it costs a fortune to heat it. By the way, as well. So
what I was getting at was, have you ever lived in like a detached house, or have you always lived in an apartment, or where
both
apartments?
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in a suburb of Copenhagen in a detached house. My room at my parents' was, I don't know, 10, 11 square meters.
Yep.
That was it.
And you had a backyard and a front yard?
Yeah. Huge garden. My parents were spent a lot in the garden. They were garden people. And and I had a sister, or have a sister, we have we each had a room, and my parents had a bedroom, and then we had my dad had an office there.
Yeah,
big living room, big kitchen, back entrance with washing machines and all of that. And so I think my childhood home was about 120 square meters.
Yeah.
And
I'm always interested because in Australia, especially where I live, because I don't live in the city, I live in a country town. And back in the days when a lot of these areas were being built, like your standard block, like where I live, on my house is a quarter of an acre. So every house is on a semi-quarter of an acre block. Which I'm not quite sure how big that is in square meters, but I would say my block would maybe be might be 100 meters long, 50 meters, 70 meters long, maybe half that wide. So my house sits right at the front, and and then I've got a lot of green area in between and a big shed at the back, and so was the neighbour and things like that. So it's definitely a lot of space out in the country.
But it sounds relatively similar to European, or at least Danish. It sounds similar in size. Yeah. Your house, how many square meters is that?
Small. I think it's only about. I think it's like 15 squares or something. I don't know. They might measure it differently. That sounds small compared to what you were saying. It's a 3-bedroom house, but it's not a big house by any imagination. It was what they call an old commission house. So when the government built housing back in the day for people, I guess, it was called government housing back then, and our house was one of them. And then after a while, the government tend to keep them for maybe 15 or 20 years, and they sell them off privately for people to buy. So it's a 3-bedroom house, but I wouldn't say by any stretch of the imagination that it's big. Like our smallest bedroom is probably only 3 by 3 meters by 3 meters.
So that's 9 or 10 square meters.
Something like that. And mine and Rebecca's room might be a little bit bigger. It might be 4 by 4, and and the kitchens, they're all similar size. The kitchen's probably the same, maybe 3 by 3, and the lounge might be 5 by 5. So so it's not an overly big house.
No, but it sounds rather similar to what I'm used to from.
It's big enough for me.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you don't need to have all these. I mean, when you have a big room, you have extra tables, extra chairs, or maybe even a lounge.
Extra cleaning,
exactly. And we tend to. Europeans are pragmatic. We just tend to get rid of all that. Just give us the needed stuff. All the nice stuff is just usually, as you say, it costs extra.
Yeah, I find in Australia there's a lot of keeping up with the Joneses, as they say. Like, everyone wants a big brick house with a cinema room in it and this and that, and
Yeah.
And in the end, do you really, all that sort of stuff, like, and that's fine. And I won't begrudge anyone who wants to put themselves $500,000 in debt to to build that and pay it off for the rest of their life. Yeah. Like, that's what they want to do, and then they want to, borrow another $50,000 and drive the best car around and things like that. But that's never been me. I remember having some friends who said to me once, "When are you going to sell this house and update it?" And I was like, "Well,
why would I?
I'll probably never sell it. Like this was the size house my parents had when I grew up, so I never knew a bigger house or a bigger style of living, I guess, than what I had and what I've still got here. So I always said that once my kids move out, there'll be plenty of room
that's exactly
in our
it.
house.
Yeah, that's exactly
the kids
it.
Won't be here forever. So
probably you and Beck will probably sit back in 10 years' time and say, this house is huge, we should sell.
Yeah, that's it. We could very well. The problem with selling it is then, you still got to pay more to get a better house.
That's the thing.
I was pretty lucky when I bought our house here. Like, it was at the bottom end of a housing in Australia. It cost me about €30,000 for my house. So now I could sell the house for, probably €200,000, but I'd only get the same quality house, to buy another one for 200,000. So I'd then have to spend, €300,000 or €400,000. So you're not actually getting anywhere further on, because you still got to spend that extra.
Exactly.
Once
that's the thing. It's people think, you have a lot of money because you have like free value in your house. Yeah, but still, it's unless you sell and don't buy something else.
That's it.
But you have to live somewhere else anyway.
That's dead right, don't you? So, it just goes around in a circle. But yeah, so I always find it interesting. Like, I've stayed in England a few times with this cousin I was telling you about in Wales, and he had a house on a block in England, like, but it was just like apartment blocks all the way along, 2-story they were, but they were probably, I would say maybe 5 meters wide, 6 meters wide, maybe 10 or 15 meters deep and double story, and there would be 20 of these on one block, all jammed in next to each other, and the backyard might have been 3 meters by 3 meters. You wouldn't have a garage or anything like that for your car. Your car had to be parked on the street and things like that. So housing sort of always interests me, what other people have lived in and things like that in different countries.
It's probably what you're talking about. There's probably the Victorian architecture style. Yeah. There's a red brick houses. They look very classic, very Peter Pan, very because they would build hundreds of thousands of these 150 years ago, and they still stand.
Yeah, definitely. So they're quite interesting.
But you are right, they are small.
Definitely small. But, you hear what the neighbors are doing.
Exactly. And in such a house, you can even have one living in the basement, one on the first floor, and one family on the second floor. I mean, you can have 3 apartments in there.
That's another thing that interests me with houses. Like, Australian houses don't have a basement. We don't have an attic. Like, it's, when I see these things on TV, I go, well, I'd love one of them. I could put stuff down there, but, we have a shed in the backyard instead to put stuff in. Like, it's just a lot of the houses, I'd say, where I live, I think a lot of them are referred to as like a Californian bungalow or something similar to that is the design that they're called. So, so we have no attic. I mean, there's no reason why, because I have a pointy angled roof. Like, I could, you could probably pay someone to get up there and floor it if you really wanted to. But it's just not something that is just Australian, I guess.
It's just for the big huntsmen up there. They live there.
Most definitely. And hopefully that's all that lives up there.
You never know. But here in Germany, particularly here in the big cities, in Munich, I can see that all new houses that are built, they have a basement, and they have a room in the basement for you to park at least 1 or 2 cars. Because on the streets, it's getting so cramped. So they I don't know if it's a law or they just kindly somehow motivate new builders to make sure that they can have their car on their lot, so that it's not parked on the street.
Yeah. Speaking of places to stay and things like that, let's wheel it back around. And is there anywhere unique that you've ever stayed? I remember you telling me about your villa in Tuscany that you go and stay in. Have you ever stayed anywhere else that's quite unique, I guess, in sense of the imagination?
No. Yeah, well, I would have to think about that. Nothing comes to mind right now, but I could tell you that there are a couple of places where I would like to stay, unique places. We have in Denmark, we have a couple of lighthouses by the coast. That would be
some
really
in Australia too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be a thing that I would love to do. And in Norway, there is a company called VIP, VIPP. They actually make waste buckets and lamps and stuff, but they have designed a couple of sort of one room overnight shelters, very fancy, very modern.
The bubble thing.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah,
you can see through.
Yeah, but these are. I wouldn't. They're more elegant than a shipping.
Yeah.
They're rectangular, but and they're filled with glass windows, and they're in the middle of nowhere in the mountains with great views, and you can rent these for I think the
Norway a small fortune.
Yeah, Norway, it's a small fortune. But a couple of our friends went there last year, and they said, this was absolutely unique. It cost a bloody fortune, but the experience was so wonderful. It was in the middle of nature, and they would then, the hosts, they would come with food in, golf car or whatever. It was a big plot of land, and they said, this was a really unique experience because, and they were staying on a starry night, on a couple of starry nights, nice. And it was just amazing. So an experience like that would be something on my bucket list, but I can't really say I've stayed somewhere unique where it's just wow. Always nice. But not something very special. How about you?
I stayed on a houseboat in Prague. That was quite nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was something different. It was a little bit, it wasn't right in the middle of the city, but it was out. It was probably 4 or 5 stops out on the train somewhere, but it was in a nice, it was like in a cutting off the main river. And it was quite nice. It was a new and upcoming area, so there was a brewery over the other side of the water from us and things like that. So that was quite interesting. In what else have I done? In Poland, I stayed in a castle for a night. That was interesting as well. Called Shonj, I think this castle was called. It had a fairly long history, so that was quite nice. But what I seen the other day, which really interests me, in the middle of Melbourne, someone has taken a crane at some stage and lifted 4 Airstream caravans on top of a building right in the middle of the city. So you can stay on a roof of a building right in the middle of the city in one of them, old silver Airstream caravans. And there's 4 of them up there. So that's pretty expensive. I think it's about $400 Australian a night. So what's that? It's
of course it is.
250 euros or something.
Yeah,
a night to stay there. But I think it might be something I might put on my bucket list at some stage. I think it'd be quite a cool experience to stay on a caravan.
I would love that.
A caravan in the middle of the city on a roof.
That would be right up my alley. That would be something.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's the deluxe version. There's 3 what they call standard, and the deluxe one has a bit of a fence around it, and it has a hot tub outside where you can see, all over the city from this hot tub out the front of the caravan. So
Well,
It sounds
I do like accommodation with character. I have to say. I mean, it's something I am willing to actually pay a little extra for something that's a bit out of the ordinary. And when you just said castle, I have stayed in castles here in Europe. That's it's just funny because I don't really think of them. I know they're special. Yeah. But it's just because we have so many castles.
Yeah, so, that's it, isn't it?
And they are often turned into hotels because it costs a fortune to run these big places.
To keep them up.
So So I've stayed in castles. So yeah, that's something special. Obviously, yeah.
Other than that, I don't think I've stayed anywhere really. I'm trying to think of anywhere that was quite unique other than the riverboat and the castle in all the places I've been.
Have you got something special for China now that you're looking something unique? Apart from spending Christmas in China is
not much. Actually, it's really hard to. I find this too sometimes when we go and visit friends in Europe. Not you, but our other friends in Freiburg, because we generally go and hang out with them for a couple of weeks, and it's sort of I don't like to plan anything because when you go there, they always have a plan of what to do.
Yeah.
And it's similar with going to China. I think we have a WeChat group with Willow and the people she lives with, and they're like, "Oh, when you get here, we might go and do this." And so I always find that it's sometimes, depending who you're going to see, it's better not to plan anything because you don't actually know what they might have planned. So I always have a couple of things in the back of my mind that, hey, I might go and do, but I really haven't got too much planned for the 7 days or 8 days that we're in China at this stage. So
okay,
just have to see what. There's a couple of hot springs though around this town, which might be nice in winter to go and relax in some hot springs in the mountains that are around there. So that's one thing I will certainly be doing. I'm quite interested to go into the old, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but this city was settled by the Germans back in the start of the 19th century. So they've got a nice old town, semi-fake old town area that's meant to look like Europe. So I'm keen to go and actually have a look and see if it's done up Christmassy, like like you would in Europe.
Yes.
When we went there in summer, there was a few wooden booths in this square, so I assume that could be a Christmas market-y thing possibly going on there. So we'll definitely go and have a look at that. There's 2 aquariums in this town. We went to one last time, so if I'm short of things to do, I might go and have a look at that. I'm a sometime fan of aquariums, and sometimes not. It depends. If there's something else to do, I'll probably go and do that instead.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you just got to you've got to fill in the day. Actually, the other aquarium that we went to in China, in Qingdao, this city where Willow lives, was called Polar Ocean World, and it was really good. Actually, I quite enjoyed it because it was all being polar. It was all about the Arctic, so they had beluga whales in there. Like,
wow,
and I'd never seen a beluga whale before. Like they had 2 or 3 of them floating around, and they had Arctic walruses, polar bears, and things like that.
Wow.
So it was quite unique. It was on a grand scale. I would say it was similar to like what I would suppose SeaWorld is like in America, and they had shows and things on during the day. But what I actually found quite refreshing about the shows is the shows were more about the other performers. Like they had acrobats and like dancers who would swing on trapeze, and like maybe the dolphins would come up, and maybe the whale, but it would only be for, I would say, 20% of the show was dedicated possibly only towards the animals, and the rest was towards the act that was going on. So I'm not a big. Well, I am. I don't like to see animals treated badly because that's not nice. And a lot of people would say, well, don't go to an aquarium and don't go to a zoo and don't do this. But we went, and as far as I could see, they looked like they were all treated well. I mean, some of them possibly could have had a bigger pool or something, but that's always the case.
With everywhere. A whale, it's different. It's difficult to have whales. I mean,
I mean, the beluga's quite small though. Literally, it's like a bigger dolphin, like probably twice the length of a dolphin, but probably only about the same girth as a dolphin. So yeah, but that was really interesting to see a beluga whale because, you only ever see them on like, videos from the Arctic and places like that,
Yeah.
I often see polar bears trying to eat them on documentaries and things like that. So
we went to an aquarium in Vancouver, Canada, and that was a really great experience as well. So I really agree with you. It's always a balance, but there are aquariums with a higher degree of research than others. Yeah. So the ones where you have like researchers and science people around, maybe I'm naive, but I think they treat their animals well.
It makes you feel better about the whole experience, doesn't it? If you think they're
maybe it's just conservation. That. Yeah.
It does. Like, it's because I like to go to ones that are not necessarily sea life. Like sea life is everywhere, and sea life is the same no matter where you go. Like they've always got the same sort of setup and things like that. And I've been to a dozen sea lifes, and I'm going to go to sea life in Bangkok because I'm just looking for something to do in Bangkok as well.
Yeah.
So I will go there again. I've been to sea life in Munich and Melbourne, and London and Berlin and all these different places, and they're all. They all follow the same tried and trusted, method that you find at all of them. So they're not overly exciting. So when you can go to one that's maybe a little bit different. I went to an aquarium in Lisbon in Portugal, and I'll still say to this day it's probably the best aquarium I've ever been to. It's not run by Sea Life. It's just a private one, I guess. But it was lots of really, really big tanks and big, massive glass encounters, where you could see everything. But I'm always more comfortable going to aquariums and zoos in the West, as I would call it, than in Asia, because I find that in Asia they can be a real hit and miss, especially zoos. Maybe not so much aquariums, but I've been to some terrible zoos in Asia that I've actually left. I've walked out and gone, that's no good at all. And I did that in Qingdao when we went to China last time. We went to the zoo in Qingdao mainly just to see a panda, because I always like to see a panda because they're that sort of unique.
It's kind of the Chinese thing.
Yeah, they're like a unique animal. So we went to the zoo. Because I took my sister with me, and she'd never seen a panda before, because there's only one set of pandas in Australia, and that's in Adelaide. So it's stayed away and 10 hours away by car, or things like that. So you don't often. So it's not somewhere you go naturally. So we went to see this panda in Qingdao Zoo, and even it wasn't in a really great enclosure, and a lot of the animals. There didn't look to be much food and much water, and the enclosures were small. And in the end, I said, I've got to get out of here. I said, this is no good. And I actually thought it would probably be like that, because I'd experienced other zoos once again, I chased panda down in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and it was really good. The panda enclosure there was fantastic, but everything else was terrible. You could feed a tiger, but the tiger looked like it was drugged up to the eyelids, and things like that. So I have a real quandary about going to zoos. In Asia.
There's a lot of ethics about keeping animals, and we just, as you say, in the West, we probably look at things differently than they do.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I've seen those zoos as well, and I avoid them. And also because going to the zoo, well, if it's a zoo again with research and scientists that work for the better, I would say. We can't paint all zoos bad, because there is some really good zoos. Yeah, absolutely.
I've never been to Munich Zoo, but by all accounts, it's a
good zoo.
It's a top class zoo. Melbourne's a top class zoo. I've been to a few good ones. I've been to Berlin. Berlin was a really good zoo as well. So there's certainly some really good zoos out there. There's no doubt about that, and some are doing some really great work with conservation, while others are not, and that's as simple as it gets, really, isn't it? Like.
And it's not like every person living in the city, they can't just leave and go out in nature and see like a polar bear. And so I think for educational purposes, it's they're doing important work. Absolutely. But yeah, there are certain ways of education and keeping the animals and stuff that treat them nicely. That's all I'm saying.
Well, that's it. You're dead right. Like I hate seeing animals treated this badly. I've always had animals, and I've always looked after him. Like one of the big stresses when we go on holidays, like I've got a really old rabbit, and he's 9 years old, and he's probably well past his use by date. And I don't like going away in summer and leaving him with friends because no one looks after your animals as good as we do. And we bring him inside when it's hot. He's inside at the moment because it's hot. Things like that. So pets can be really stressful if you've got pets and you have to and you travel, because for some people, they mean a lot to them, and some people don't travel because they've actually got animals and things like that. I know my parents always had a couple of dogs, and and they would always find it hard to go anywhere without taking the dogs because
and dogs are not allowed in many places. I mean, you have to really, as you say, you have to plan your travels accordingly. That's a whole another can of worms there. Traveling and with pets. We should probably discuss that at some point because that is, there are lots of opinions about it as well. Yeah.
These rabbits and the rabbit I've got, like it's only left over because Willow had it. So I've had it for that long and she's left. And so I'm left with this rabbit, which I love this rabbit. He's, it cost me 400 Australian dollars at the vet about a month ago. So that's how much I love him because he was sick and I thought he was dying, and they were talking about euthanizing him, and I was like, I would just prefer him to die naturally than me have to make the decision to actually put him down. Like I find that really hard. But he pulled through anyway, and he's back into good health. But he's at that age where he's lived probably 3 years longer than most rabbits do.
So is that going to be the last animal?
Yeah, I'll never have another pet after that until I'm well into my old age. And if I would decide I'm not going to travel much anymore, then I like cats. I'm a cat person, more than dogs because cats tend to look after themselves. But you can't. Cats are a bit hard in Australia. I don't know about in Germany. You can't let a cat outside anymore. They're meant to stay inside all the time because they kill too many native birds and things like that. So in our shire, you've actually got to keep your cat inside or have it leashed outside like a dog on a rope or something like that, so you can't have them wandering freely. Been to many cities though where cats and dogs wander freely down the streets. But
absolutely. Well, here you can have cats and they're allowed to go out and because I think a cat really should be allowed to go outside. It's in its nature.
Definitely.
And, I've seen indoor cats that are strictly indoor cats, and they tend to be weird.
You're right. So there'll be no more animals in my future once the rabbit goes. We had a guinea pig early on in the year, but he passed away. So and it's always sad. Like I'm not too proud to say that I shed a tear when our guinea pig died, and I'll no doubt shed a tear when our rabbit dies because they become part of your family.
Of course,
they're part of your life. So
I've had dogs and guinea pigs and rabbits and all. It's sad. It's sad, definitely. Particularly a dog. I mean, I know what a dog
man's
can
best friend.
Yeah,
that's it, isn't it?
It really is.
That's life, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Mark, you have to finish your packing.
I've got some packing to do still.
Yeah.
Before I go to Melbourne tomorrow night and China at 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning. So.
Yes. Wonderful. And we'll see how it goes in terms of recording the next segment here in the podcast. But I assume we'll be in contact, and you can just let me know.
We'll try and get in contact, definitely. Yeah. And if we can't get one happening from China, we'll definitely get one happening from Bangkok the week later because I'll be in the apartment of our own when we're in Bangkok and not so dependent on what others want us to do when we're in Bangkok. We'll have our own time frames, so we can definitely. But like I said, we'll touch base next Monday at some stage and see if we can work out a time to jump online and see how it sounds.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do that.
We will.
You've been listening to Southern Summers and Northern Winters. Mark Wilde and Anders Jensen here. This was episode number 8, I think. Mark,
it was number 8.
Time flies.
Time flies. 2 months, been 2 and a bit months.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to look, Mark, at the analytics. I think slowly we can start seeing if anybody's even listening. But I think
that would be nice.
I think we have listeners. So
I hope so. I look forward to hearing that.
Yes.
Still waiting for that first question. Come on, people. Someone ask us a question or something to talk about.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
No, not at all. We don't bite.
Well, Mark, you have safe travels these coming days, and looking forward to see updates on your Facebook pages.
You will. You'll see them everywhere.
Yeah. Say hello to the family.
I will. You say hello to yours?
I will.
Okay.
Take care.
We'll talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye.